Welcome back to Sidewalk Skyline podcast. Today we have two Kevins on this episode. I'm talking with Kevin Mast and another Kevin, Kevin Saunders, and I. We still from time to time go out doing some music and ministry engagements under the moniker Two Fish. Well, back in the summer of 2016, we spent an evening with Hope City Church in Barrie, Ontario. And that's where Kevin Mast is the founding pastor. They're now in, I believe, their 12th year of activities. And they're having a helpful presence in downtown Barrie and among the street affiliated and the poor. So welcome, Kevin. I love your
Thank
name.
you. I've never met a Kevin I didn't like. Have you? I mean, come on.
No, seriously. In fact, I think in the etymology of the name, Kevin means lovable.
It's something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Beloved of God or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll take it.
So, yeah, for
For sure.
sure.
It's been a minute. I think that might be the last time I saw you. I have been at in Windsor for something since, so I might have seen
Hmm.
you then. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it might have been a downtown Windsor community
Right.
collaborative event.
So we've discovered it's lovable but not memorable. Okay.
I
Yeah, yeah.
I don't remember.
So we bump
But
into each other once in a while. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I was trying to think if the trip to Hope City Church back in 2016, if it was that the first time we met, or did we meet prior to that? And I wondered if maybe Riley McLaren had been a part of getting us connected.
I think it must have been Riley. Uh, I don't remember, but we must have met at some point for me to make the invitation to you to come up, right? I don't remember.
Yeah, probably.
So much has
Yeah.
changed.
Oh, I
So much
know,
has
eh?
happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I remember the night that Kevin and I came up to visit you, Kevin, and being in the Hope City Center and meeting the people that were there that night. It just felt so much like home to us. We were kindred spirits in our desire to serve God from that Matthew 25 paradigm. Um, uh, I remember I still remember a couple individuals, a couple characters that I met back then, and but yeah, I just remember the overall. It was a warm, inviting space to be in, and a real authenticity that we were experiencing being alongside you guys. And I don't know if you even remember much about us being there, or if there was anything you remembered from that night.
I mean, is there something specific you're getting at?
No,
I
no, no. I'm
Wow, bless my heart. First of all, thank you for saying so. These are core fundamental pillars of our hope community is to be authentic,
Mhm.
is to just offer dignity to everyone. And so some of the characters, some are bigger characters than others,
Yeah,
are sometimes serving in roles or learning to serve in roles, and they're coming out of poverty or marginalization, sometimes addiction, or they have capacity or mental health issues, and they're serving our sound team or projection or something like that, and it gets pretty interesting pretty quickly. So we have a lot of quirky things that happen. I think back then, so you're mentioning the Hope Center, so that was probably our first space, which was just this tiny little corner unit downtown. It's 800 square feet. It's now our coffee shop. We run a nonprofit social enterprise
hmm,
coffee shop there. And the Hope Center's moved to a larger space behind that. And we were meeting in the movie theater then, right?
yeah,
So it was dark with colored lights and
yeah,
I think a
yeah.
couple of hundred people. I think in general, what I remember the most about that is that probably we had no idea what we were doing. We were trying to plant a church and build a church. We thought we were doing it right, and we were just not really being true to who we were.
Mm.
And who we were then is not who we are now. I mean, we would have Two Fish back to play, of course, but who we were in a movie theater with colored lights and the darkness was not who we are. We do much, much better
Well, that's
sitting
why
around tables.
yeah, that's why I brought it up. We're
Yeah.
looking for gigs.
You're always welcome at Barrie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned how over time when you're in a new chapter, a new space of ministry in your life, that you change over time,
Yeah.
and at the same time, some of the truer things that were inside us that were maybe deeper but not fully formed, some of those truer things tend to tend to emerge over time, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we stop fighting with ourselves so much,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
at least I did.
Right. We had, in the beginning, we didn't plan, I never planned to plant a church. I just kind of fell into it. We were in a coffee shop the same time, the same day every week, by design, I guess. So it's just the daily and weekly rhythms, and seeing the people, getting to know the people in our downtown, and God just breaking my heart and a few other people as well. And so we just started meeting there in a coffee shop. Now we run our own coffee shop, which is great. And so just trying to stay in step with what the Lord was doing. And sometimes we strayed from that a little bit, and He corrects us. But what I've discovered, to your point, those deeper things, right? Um, Luke talks about in his gospel, he talks about, he quotes these words of Jesus, that the kingdom of heaven is like yeast,
Mm,
and yeast is alive, and a woman, he says, works it all through the dough, and that expands.
mm,
In this metaphor, I don't know what the dough is. It's not the whole world, but it's in our relationships, in our community, in the connections that we make, in our rhythms, and that yeast is alive. And so, are we tapping into that life of Christ, and is He the one that's bringing the life to our ministry? And so, we're just trying to be faithful at this point every day, showing up,
yeah.
and in those authentic and transparent, often relationships that you mentioned earlier. That's where we see Jesus showing up, because Matthew 25, you mentioned, right? That Matthew
Hmm.
25 heart. Whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And growing up in the conservative suburban church, I was always taught, oh, yeah, I'm serving Jesus by serving others, and then I'm going home.
Yeah.
But really, I think I might have learned this from like Greg Paul at Sanctuary Toronto or
Hmm.
something at
Hmm.
one point, where he wrote God in the Alley, right?
Yeah,
And
great
he
book.
writes about, yeah, it's wonderful. He writes about how it's not just that I'm serving on behalf of Jesus, it's Jesus who I'm serving, and He's there with us where two or three are gathered, right?
Hmm.
He's
Hmm.
there in that transaction between us. He's with us. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is among you. And so that's really at Hope. That's all we're trying to tap into right now, and
Yeah.
watching the Lord act in people's lives.
So could we put a new mission statement, the church with a yeast infection?
I don't know that I would go that far. We're gonna edit this part out, right?
Oh no. Oh no, no. Keep the juicy bits in.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, so it started with like you say, you and a handful of others, just beginning to go to this coffee shop, beginning to have your hearts touched by what was going on in the community. And somehow that led to planting a church. But now, all these years later, you've become I saw on your website five different uh, entities under the umbrella of Hope, Barrie. The Hope Center, Higher Grounds Coffee House, Hope House Barrie, Hope Conference Barrie, and Hope City Church Barrie. So
that sounds
um,
like a lot.
it does
I
sound
must
like a
I must
lot.
be very busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's again, to think about the kingdom of God, there is this multiplying that happens, right?
Yeah.
There is this development and this spread into various manifestations. But so tell me a little bit about those five things, and maybe a bit about how it emerged, why it became important to
Mhm.
focus on that?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking about that. The website is very sparse. We're in a time of transition right now,
Hmm.
and we want to honor what God has been doing already and follow where he's leading. And so what we discovered is we're attracting, I will answer your question, but we're attracting a lot of people from various churches, which is really neat to come and serve with us.
Hmm.
And other pastors and other churches are starting to get involved with us and partner with us. It's a difficult road here to try to intentionalize that. But the Lord is starting to bring that about. And we thought, well, we need to respond to what he's doing. And so we most recently officially changed our name legally and with Canada Revenue Agency and so on
Hmm.
from Hope City Church Barrie to Hope Barrie. So when you
Hmm.
see the website and you see these 5 or 6 things, the way that we're structuring now is we're Hope Barrie and Hope City Church is one of those ministries,
Hmm.
but Hope Center, Hope House, and so on all fall under that. It started a little bit before the coffee shop. That's 11 and a half, 12 years ago in the coffee shop when that began as kind of a disciple making movement in a coffee shop. And where you make disciples, that's where the church grows. So that became a church planting movement. I don't
Right.
like those words though, you know,
Hmm.
but it is what it is. And then just slowly over time, like responding to the needs in front of us. And so we're very nimble.
Hmm.
We're able to change very quickly because we're very small. And everybody is just so united on our team and like-minded, united in just wanting to serve the Lord and meet needs. So it actually began 5 or 6 years before the coffee shop when I was getting involved in street involved ministry. My heart was being pulled there by the Lord out of this, wealthy suburban
Hmm.
mega church for Canada, a couple of
Yep.
thousand people and a staff of, I was one of 10 pastors. And my heart was already for a number of years being pulled into the margins of our urban center where the highest needs were. And where would Jesus go,
Yeah.
So, I mean, he goes to the suburbs too. Of course he does. But he seems to always start in the margins, right? Just read the Gospels.
Hmm.
So he incarnates into the margins. He identifies with the margins. And so that's where my heart was being pulled. So we began by thinking, wow, because the Lord opened some doors for us out of that coffee shop to start meeting in a space. This is before the movie theater. So we started doing that on Sundays and renting a space, and people started coming out. We began as like Hope Cafe on Sunday nights and sitting around tables, but it just attracted people who were looking for belonging and looking for acceptance and looking for love. And we were somehow able to provide that. And once again, one of those pillars is dignity, just provide dignity to people. And people who were coming from the street and coming from the rooming houses and coming from right across the street from us. We had girls working. And so we would like bring them coffee and donuts and invite them in out of the cold and so on. And we made lots of friends that way.
Hmm.
And we had no idea what we were doing. It was all new to me. And we thought, well, we need to organize and structure this like a church. So we organized a church service. That's all we knew what to do. But over time, we began to realize we needed a full-time presence downtown. And hence, we were able to open up that first Hope Center, that first small little 800 square feet, which we outgrew. And then the Lord opened doors for us to move into a 3,000 square foot space and convert that into a coffee shop and begin to give people job skills, mentorship, discipleship in that environment, move people forward in life, give them a hand up, but also giving handouts out of there. We have a program where anybody can come in and get a coffee and get a sandwich or something. But it also operates as a coffee shop where you can come and have a great lunch and you can buy that. So now what we see is we see people who are mixing from all different walks of life, like people from the suburbs and the high-rise condos mixing with street involved individuals and recovering addicts or not recovering addicts, and so on, all mixing in this space. And it's just such a beautiful, messy thing. So yeah, so Hope Center is our base of operations where we run our programming out of, which is mostly, here's a word we don't use. Language really matters to us because language determines our DNA, right? It creates something. So we don't use the term volunteer, but for our purposes here today, it's basically volunteer driven. It's community member driven, you know.
Mhm.
We used to have staff like 5 years ago, something happened in the world of which we no longer speak, right? And before that happened, and a lot has changed since then and during that time. We had more staff and we were a little bit busier and we were running more formal programming, but now everything's really informal and really community driven and really run by volunteer staff. So that's affinity groups and men's groups, women's groups, mental health groups, addiction recovery groups, occasionally grocery assistance programs and meal programs. We run out of there, but it's a far smaller scale than you're probably imagining.
Yeah.
We do more out of the coffee shop, and I think I do more ministry, more personal frontline ministry in the coffee shop context than I do in the formal Hope Center context. It's just a far lower barrier for people to enter into relationship and conversation with a pastor or with the
Yeah.
church in a coffee shop. So we disciple people in the coffee shop. We do church functions there that don't look like church functions, and people
Mhm.
don't always realize that they're in church.
Right.
You know, we're in relationship and in community.
That's
And
good.
then Hope House, we had people who were just struggling with housing security and struggling with addictions. And so we adopted material from Finding Freedom and the React program that you guys are familiar with in Windsor, the recovery
Mhm.
education for addiction and complex trauma. So we staffed around that for a time, and we found that we needed Christian psychotherapists to really meet the needs of people suffering with their trauma. So we ran a number of cohorts through that program, and we began housing on a small scale some men in a sober living house in with a lived-in peer support worker in a discipleship strategy where they're in recovery.
Mhm.
That's been incredibly successful, like 79 to 80% success rate. The provincial average is just over 50. I think it's like close to 56%. So it's been incredibly successful um, and very fruitful. People have gotten saved and baptized, and we raised up some guys to serve. But since then, once again, with finances and what happened after the pandemic and so on, we scaled down a little bit, and that program is not running full time anymore. And it's a sober living house that's low supervision, high accountability. And so we've got a couple of rooms that we're doing intake for right now to get some men in there. I'm talking a lot here describing these things. It's your turn.
Well, that tends to happen in interviews, right?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, yeah. I'm curious what you're saying about like during the pandemic and what do you now that we can look in the rear view mirror. What do you think that you and Hope Barrie lost in the pandemic? What do you think you've gained having gone through that?
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on sometimes. So we have made gains. The losses, like many other churches, there was a sifting of who was there, and there was a loss to churches almost everywhere
Mhm.
in terms of attendance and participation. Some people just didn't come back. And so that happened to us as well. One of the things that we learned, though, was that the most resilient people through the pandemic, we think, um, were the marginalized and vulnerable because they were already accustomed to being isolated,
Yeah,
to being in the margins.
yeah,
They already know how to survive that.
yeah.
And so some of them did really well, and some of them still with us today really grew in their faith as
They
well.
didn't miss their vacation to Cancun.
That's right. That's right. You know, but they grew in their faith during that time. And so
Yes.
we have people who have continued in their journey of healing and recovery through both mental health issues, through addiction, in their poverty, and have grown spiritually and emotionally. They've grown in their capacity through that time. So that was a huge gain for us. Another loss to us was that our our demographics, the geography changed in our downtown core. This diaspora took place, this dispersion of people. So unfortunately, I live in the suburbs. I live in the south end of Barrie. It's, a 10 or 15-minute drive to where I serve. It's not okay. I should be living where I work and serve. We haven't been able to make that happen. Part of that is cost of living downtown. We just can't. Um, Part of that is my wife. Uh, but what we found is like during that dispersion from downtown, a lot of the houses in my neighborhood were getting bought up by investors. And I suddenly now have the margins coming to me. We have the mission coming to our neighborhood where we have rooming houses around us now. So what started happening slowly during that time in 2020, 2021, I began to recognize people walking down the sidewalk in my neighborhood from downtown. And I'm like, what are you doing here? Right in my neighborhood, And it's a good thing. So a lot of them are just not downtown anymore, a lot of the people. And that's one of the things that happened. Now in downtown Barrie, there's a ton of gentrification happening, like many cities. So at the Hope Center and at Higher Grounds Coffee House, at Hope House, we literally live in the shadow of progress in the mornings, literally, because there's this 34, 36-story condo that was just built across the street from us and more coming. So that's also changing the demographic downtown, and people are getting dispersed further away from downtown. So a number of things changed, but one of the positives then was it allows us to go deeper with the people that we have and work more diligently and more intentionally at what we're good at and what we believe we're called to do. So, in terms of, we were talking about this earlier, in terms of poverty intervention, we look at like the first level being relief, meet that need. That person's cold. Get them warm. That person is hungry. Feed them. Meet that need, relief. And then the next level being rehabilitation. So how can I help them to heal and to grow and to get to the point that they can start um, feeling the dignity that God gives them and and engaging positively in community and contributing. And then above rehabilitation would be development. Is how do we develop that person to become John 10:10, everything that God created them to be, right? I've come that you can have life and have it abundantly. That's all of life, not just knowing that you're going to heaven when you die. That's everything right now, right? And so that's what we really began to work on more. We were kind of relieved of the pressure of a lot of the relief work, and we're able to do what we see in the Gospels and in Acts and in the letters, the really Jesus-centered, informed work of rehabilitation and developing people to their fullest potential.
I think that for a lot of Christians, a lot of churches, we tend to focus on the first and the third, right? Oh, what can our youth group do? Oh, I know, let's go downtown and hand out sandwiches on a Friday night. And that's great for those handing out sandwiches to have that experience, to see part of the world that maybe they've never really looked at. So it does something to them in the giving. But in terms of rehabilitating lives, well, let's just get them to Jesus and get them into church,
Yeah.
and then if we could just get them there, then we'll then there should be this some kind of magical growth that happens, and all
Mhm.
of a sudden they're better. But it doesn't work that way, right? this
It
this
doesn't.
this rehabilitation piece is huge. I know that in our early days we had a food bank, and well, actually we were giving out grocery cards, and we had a long line of people that wanted a grocery card, and we would like one person at a table during certain hours would have all of these 5 minute or less interactions with people that they came, they got their grocery card, and they left. And we didn't know them, they didn't know us. There was no opportunity to. Uh, I, I guess the thinking was, well, if we position ourselves as providing some small service, like the cup of cold water, right?
Mhm.
Then perhaps that becomes a point of identification where they're going to say, "Oh yeah, those people in there, they're all right." That's what we hope for.
Maybe it will be attractional. Maybe someday.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but this work of rehabilitation, I mean, I think in the work of rehabilitation, that's where we get to see both the miraculous and the long, slow grind, right? The long
Absolutely.
suffering.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, so um, earlier on before the podcast, we were talking a little bit about, how sometimes in wanting to be helpful and wanting to um, interact with people, we can actually um, sometimes do more harm than good. And do you want to unpack that a little bit of just some thoughts you have around that?
Yeah. Dangerously. Here comes the controversy. It's not
Yeah.
harm.
Social media
Um,
is never controversial. So,
we we uh we see a lot of what you're describing at both ends of that spectrum, right? Like the youth groups and the grassroots groups and people coming down and handing out sandwiches. And then we see the other end of the spectrum where people just want to go out and do street outreach ministry and see that flash in the pan. They don't realize that, like you were saying, Kevin, it's that long grinding work of getting into the trenches with people and staying there in the dirt and muck with them before you ever get an opportunity to begin to lift them out. And a lot of people get really discouraged by that when they come and see us from other churches because they think that, oh, there's going to be this, spiritual thing that happens and this person's life is
yeah,
going to change right in front of me. But that's just not the case.
there,
And
yeah,
I get the privilege of speaking to a lot of churches and a lot of people now. They come to us and ask us about our experience and what we've learned and what we're researching as well. And so your question, sometimes are we causing more harm than good, is exactly one of the things that I talk about. It's easy to be nice, but sometimes we confuse nice with being kind. It's not always the same thing. Sometimes helping does hurt. Sometimes by coming downtown, I'll tell you a story. We see groups, they come downtown and they do this regularly and they organize, buying pizzas and just handing them out to people, or they set up a table on a sidewalk and in a parking lot and they hand out coffees and they hand out food. And the people that they're serving come with their hand out. They get the free food, so they take it. And then they go around the corner and they sit on the curb somewhere and they pull out the sandwich. They eat that, they discard the apple or whatever is in the bag. And there's a certain degree there when you see that happening, it's hard to miss that they're still marginalized. There's an
mm,
us and a them that is happening, and they know who the them are. We had people come into the Hope Center and we're doing our grocery assistance program and we sit down with each person. We have like a little group time together. People know that. Some people have stopped coming because of that. I don't want to talk to anybody, just give me food. Well, we're not about food. We're about community, right? But it's also attracted more people as well. So what happened early on was somebody thought it would be a great idea to make name tags, and so all of our staff, all of our people serving had name tags on, and the other people coming didn't wear name tags. And I'm like, we're reinforcing this us and them.
mm,
And they know that they're the them.
yeah,
And we're trying to build a ministry that is a community that is inclusive, that gives them dignity and identity and belonging and purpose within our community. And a name tag is working against that unless they're wearing a name tag also. So no more name tags. No more sitting separately in different parts of the room. We all mix together. So that's one thing, the us and the them. The other thing the other buzz line that we use with churches and with people a lot is stop giving. Stop giving and start sharing.
mm,
And it's a different thing, right? It's a different thing from handing out a meal, a bagged lunch or a pizza. It's different to invite them in and to sit at a table with you and to enter into a relationship with you. That's the first thing. So I'll say the controversial thing. Here it is. I talk with pastors and Christians all the time, and they'll say to me, "Oh, Kevin, I've got such a heart for poor people. I just love homeless people and poor people." And I'll say something like, "What are their names?" Right?
Yeah.
Because there has to be that
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
And that's the Christ-centered movement where
I,
he enters
yeah.
into relationship. He enters into poverty with us, and he brings good news for the poor. Luke 4 says, Luke 4, verse 18, I'm proclaiming good news for the poor. Well, what's good news for the poor? That you're going to invite them to say a prayer so they go to heaven after they die? Pretty good, pretty good. But what's really good news for the poor right now? That you're giving me a sandwich and sending me on my way? That you're giving me a clean needle or a clean crack pipe so that I can stay in my addiction and go on my way? Like, no, no, no. Come and find healing, find belonging,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes sociologists like Robert Lupton wrote Toxic Charity. Randy Stark is a Christian sociologist, and others will point out the fact that sometimes in our poverty interventions, the us and them, the marginalization of people, the giving, not sharing, the handout, but not the hand up, um, reinforces that person's learned helplessness. It
Mhm.
just reinforces it. And that might be from generational poverty. It might be because they experienced job loss or a tragic event in their life, and now they find themselves in a place of need. Um, and they start learning this principle of helplessness. And if I put my hand out, I'm in need, somebody's going to help me to meet that need. And that's disempowerment. And so what we want to do is empower people. So one of our rules is to never do for someone what they can do for themselves. Even people in the camps. I imagine you guys have camps down there.
Oh
Our
yeah.
camps are mostly hidden away in Barrie.
Hmm.
In Kitchener. My daughter and son-in-law live downtown Kitchener in a high rise, and a block away from them is one of these famous and packed encampments on a city lot. They tried to evict them. They lost that court case. Um, and so now they bring services there and so on. So it's very visible, very much in the open. In Barrie, it's not. In Barrie, it's in treat areas and parks. We have a lot of nature here, and people want to kind of be out of the way, out of sight, out of mind. So we don't see like a lot of tent cities popping up yet in downtown Barrie. It's going to come. But what I'm finding is like some of the people living rough, they're the most resilient and resourceful people I've ever met.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm not helping them by bringing them sleeping bags and warm blankets because they're already so resourceful. What can I do to help them to move forward to become everything that they were created to be? And I know what I'm saying right now might rub some people the wrong way. No, we need to do that. We need to do that relief work. And there are times that we do need to do that relief work. Absolutely. There are times
Yeah.
when somebody on the street or in their addiction or in their mental health crisis, uh, it's going to be palliative care. And maybe never any rehabilitation or development with that person. It's going to be palliative care. So we need to provide those services. The danger is that when we organize all of our efforts around that one thing, right? And so what we want to do is help people to reintegrate because God created them, God created us for relationship. So everything that I'm saying all begins with what our understanding of poverty is. And I think if we're going to be pulled towards poverty interventions, if we're going to engage poverty as churches, as groups, as individuals, um, we have to have a good understanding first of what poverty really is. And so most people will say to me, well, it's the lack of resources. Well, yeah, that's poverty. That's a symptom of poverty for sure. But what most sociologists and psychologists and people who study this will say, and I agree, is that poverty is disempowerment. And so the way we define it is it's the loss of connection between God, systems, self, and others. So now you have a person who, by example, is not necessarily able to navigate the system or advocate for themselves when harm does come their way, when something goes wrong. They're not able to maintain those familial or loving relationships or those work relationships. We had a guy who was in rehabilitation with us in our Hope House, and he was having trouble getting his Ontario Works check and all kinds of problems. And the bank was his bank account was frozen, and we were trying to mentor him how to navigate that, how to go to the bank and how to navigate that. And he just loses control. He's like, you don't understand. You don't understand how hard it is to go to the bank and to talk to a person there and to do that. And he just doesn't have the capacity to relate to people on that level. He's unable to advocate for himself. And so our job, our role, and maybe this speaks to your experience when you came here, Kevin, to meet some of the characters that you met and to feel the belonging and the inclusion and that community with people from all walks of life. Our role is to do that first,
Yeah.
is to help people to belong, to reestablish their ability to relate to us and to one another, ultimately to God, to the system and structures of this world that they have to navigate, so that then they can grow in dignity, in confidence, in ability, and we can help them to move forward in life. I feel like I'm preaching a little bit here. So I'm going to take a drink of water
All
now.
right. Hey, a little bit of a sidebar here. I noticed that this spring you went on a trip studying archaeology with for the seven churches of Asia Minor, and is that part of some studying you're doing? And tell me about that trip and what it was you were focused on in that.
Yeah, it's so weird, eh? I never thought I'd find myself in Turkey climbing around archaeology digs. It was really exciting. And some people maybe listening maybe have been there and have done tours and have gone to Ephesus and Laodicea and places that are mentioned in Revelation by Jesus, who he writes to. It was a great opportunity, and it is part of the research that I'm doing. I went with an international cohort. There were seven of us. There was a previous team of seven or eight that had gone as well, um, from all over the world, from Europe, from Finland, from uh, the US, from India, and we're in a research cohort together, and we're all studying missiology. And of particular interest to me is missional movements amongst the poor and marginalized, and how those are sustained. And so, going to the seven churches in Asia Minor, we're looking for evidence of how the church got established and how it grew. And with that, working with historical evidence, working with um, the Bible and the written evidence of the early church fathers in the first and second century following the apostolic period as well. The observations of historians at that time, like Philo and Josephus and so on, and taking all of these different puzzle pieces together. What's of particular interest to me is the ministry of the church, the establishment of the church, the incarnation of the church amongst our people, amongst the marginalized and vulnerable. And so there's some things that we saw there. There are some things that we're discovering there. There's some things that we're seeing. And so there are some propositions that I'll be making in writing, and we'll go into a doctoral project, a dissertation, and will be published. And these things are beginning to inform some of what we're doing at Hope Barrie right now, the way that they organized the early church then. And sometimes it's surprising, right? Like there are things talking about ministry amongst the marginalized and just talking about when helping hurts and the other subjects that we touched on briefly in the last few minutes. Um, One of the things that we find is that the church never organized around outreach. At Hope Barrie, outreach is a term that we don't even use. And the reason why we don't use it is because it's missiological in nature. when we say outreach, or we have an, I'm going to tick people off, when we have an outreach committee or an outreach team, or we go out on outreach, what we're actually doing, if language interprets reality or if language creates the culture of our church, then what we might be in danger of doing is actually subverting the design of the church a little bit. We're making outreach a project or a mission of the church
Mhm.
instead of the church being an incarnation of the mission of
Right,
God,
right,
right?
right.
And so we just don't use that word because we think that um, the church is just missional in nature and is always moving and always on mission. And so we're looking for where is God working now? How can I partner with that? It could be a coffee shop. It could be in this community where people are experiencing addiction or homelessness, and then responding to those things. How do we incarnate Christ into those things? And so that's what the early church did, and that's what we're seeing in the archaeological evidence and the historical record as well.
Uh, what was maybe surprising? What was maybe shocking to you in taking a closer look there?
Yeah, so adaptability is one of those things. So in missiology, the adaptive nature of the church is kind of becoming more and more of a core principle. We often speak in church planting arenas as contextualization,
Mhm.
which, we need to be careful with because that's what happened to us, right? That's the mistake that we made. Um, we thought that we were having to plant a church and contextualize the church to our downtown rather than adapt the ministry and life of the church to the systems and structures, to the geography and the demographics, to the way that the downtown community lives, right? And so that was a hard lesson that we had to learn. That's what we see in the early church. So what you see is in the Greek, you see oikia means house, not IKEA. Oikia means house. Oikos means household. So you think of the yogurt, but it's oikos is household. And so in the very first century, and even beginning in Galilee with Jesus, it's a very, very Greco-Roman context, right? A Greek culture, a Koine Greek working language, ruled by Romans, and people of this Greco-Roman context moving into Galilee, taking farmland away from people, marginalizing them even further. Remember, it's called in Matthew the Galilee of the Gentiles. So the Jews in Jerusalem are looking down on them. And the Greco-Roman rich, wealthy people, the top 8, 9%, are building these villas and they're starting to build cities. Herod started to build Greco-Roman cities in Galilee. So even there, very, very early on in the ministry of Jesus, first thing he does when he makes disciples, well, first thing he does is he goes to the synagogue, the Jewish meeting place, and he announces the kingdom of heaven, and he continues to do that. Go where the people are meeting, right? Coffee shops. Go to the synagogues. Go where the people are meeting. But then the very first thing that he does after that is when he calls his disciples, he sets up an oikos, a household-based ministry. He goes to Peter's house in Capernaum. And we often think, well, we're looking at Jesus traveling around all of Galilee and Judea, and he's doing all this street outreach ministry, but he's not. He goes to a house where he ministers to Peter's mother-in-law and heals her. And then people start bringing their sick and start bringing people to him. Then, when he trains his disciples and he sends out the 12, and then he sends out the 72 disciples, he says to them, take nothing with you. Go and find a house and let your peace rest on that house if you're welcomed. So they're setting up household-based ministry again. So that's one of the things that we see in the Greco-Roman context in Asia Minor as well. We see synagogues, which is not a Jewish word, it's a Greek word for a meeting place. We see synagogues like buildings they could be a trade guild. The Apostle Paul was a tent maker and probably a leather worker as well with tent making. And so they would have trade guilds like union shops and workplaces. Those were called synagogues. That's the word for it. And we see that there's Christian markings in these places. So you think of the Jesus fish that you see on the back of a card, an ichthus, right? There are other types of markings like that that they would carve into the stone at a synagogue, at a building, in front of a house or inside a house. And so we see how the Christians organized around community. And that's very um, it's archetypical we see when Luke writes that in Acts chapter 2, right? Starting at verse 42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, the breaking of bread and prayer. They met together every day. They ate together in their homes with glad and sincere hearts. They shared everything in common. They sold property and goods and possessions and laid the money at the disciples' feet, right? So we see that oikos, that house-based community growing, not outreach on the streets. In fact, the very next thing that happens in Acts chapter 3 is, with no chapter divisions in the original Bible, is the very next thing that happens after Luke describes that first house church kind of system is Peter and John are going to the temple at the time of prayer. So earlier
Yeah.
I mentioned daily and weekly rhythms, like going to a
Yeah.
coffee shop.
Yeah.
That's their rhythm. And they bump into this panhandler who's disabled, who's put there at the gate called Beautiful every day. And the funniest thing, this is so funny to me. It's ironic because he asks for money, and Peter says, "Silver or gold I do not have." But wait a second, wait a second. You might not have it on you right now, Peter, but back at the house a few verses earlier, you've got bags of money from all the possessions people are selling and laying the money at your feet. Hey, buddy, I don't have anything on me right now, but I'll come back later and I'll give you a toonie in your Tim Hortons cup, right? Or a grocery gift card or something. Like we've got that back at the house. No, no, what he does is, and I think this is archetypical of the ministry of Jesus in the church, is he helps them up. He's healed. Not all of us can heal people, but all of us can enter into a relationship with people and provide relational healing to people and invite them in. And that's exactly what happens with this guy is he gets healed and then he's invited into community and he's praising and worshiping God with them in the temple courts. And now he's part of them. And so it's an invitation in, not an outreach to, right?
Mm,
It's a
yeah.
with,
Yeah.
not a to.
Yeah.
I'm preaching again. Sorry.
We share a lot of the same language and ideas,
Good.
and I'm guessing that you don't love on people, you love people.
So that's one of the hardest things. That's one of the most difficult things of ministry, right?
Yeah.
Is that boundary
Yeah.
between pastor or missionary and the person that you're serving.
Yeah.
Because in my context, and probably like yours, help me out here,
Hmm.
that boundary gets erased really quickly. This is
Hmm.
my brother, my sister. I love this person. And that burden becomes very heavy in this kind of ministry.
Yeah.
And something that we do when we go out to the street to serve people, I say we loosely, not me. I mean, when people come downtown to do that, is that they might not mean to do this, but I did this. I did this in the beginning and I learned the hard way, is that you tend to see people not the way that Jesus sees them with that love for the person, but you kind of see them as a project. You kind
Right.
of alluded to that earlier, Kev.
Yeah.
Like, I just need to get this person saved
Yeah.
or get them housed or get them fed, project done, right? Which is not the same thing as being in a loving relationship with that person.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Um, so people that listen to this podcast are from all over the place. A lot of other Canadians who are curious about what God's doing in our cities. Some American listeners, handfuls of global listeners. You just never know where someone's going to pick up a podcast.
Well, you're famous. Wow.
Yeah, I'm a legend in my own mind. That's for sure. Yeah. Uh, but yeah, I mean, tens of people are listening. It's amazing. But
That's great.
the thing that I'm curious about too is tell me a bit about some of the unique characteristics of Barrie, Ontario, and what's Barrie all about?
Yeah. The good and the bad, the lovely and the ugly. And it is pretty ugly at times. I'll get to that in a moment. Barrie has been or was at one time the fastest growing city in Canada for a long time. It's now bursting at the seams where our boundaries don't allow for really any more growth. And so the city is working with the province and the surrounding regions to take over more land. They've already done a little bit of that and built kind of like where I'm living right now, actually, where
Hmm.
I'm sitting right now. Um, and we're 45 minutes drive north of Toronto. So we're mostly a commuter city, like a middle class commuter city. And so lots of subdivisions full of people who just drive back and forth to Toronto every day. And so that means that most of our industry is not at all industry, it's hospitality. So lots of restaurants and hotels and retail. And of course, we're in a lovely area where we're not called the gateway to the north or anything. That's another city, but you know, coming to Barrie, you're getting closer to Muskoka. We're on Lake Simcoe. We're very close to Georgian Bay. So we have beauty here with skiing and hiking and biking and trails and nature and the waterfront. And that's very attractive to people. And so at the same time, Barrie, for a variety of reasons, has a high homeless population and a very transient homeless population as well. And I think I know some of the reasons for that. And a couple of years ago, because the stats are changing all the time and are not reported as regularly or as accurately as we like, but I think it was 2021 or 2022, we were consistently at a rate of 8 times overdose deaths than the provincial average. 8 times.
That's crazy.
That's nuts. And it's just growing and getting worse, and the homelessness is getting worse and becoming more and more visible as well. We think that, so to your question, what happens here are a couple of things. One is we're on a corridor directly between Toronto and North Bay. So North Bay has services and Toronto has services and Barrie has services, and there's this transient population that just goes from one to the other and goes back and forth. And then you've got a prison in Gravenhurst north of us and a prison in North Bay. And then you've got the CNCC. So you've got the, what's it called? Central North Correctional Center
Hmm.
uh, in Penetanguishene. And that's not far from us. That's 40 minutes away, 45 minutes away. So there's 5,000 people at the CNCC in jail at any given moment. About 3,000 or so of them are on remand. So they're there for a month or 3 months. They're waiting for a court date or whatever, and then they're released back into the wild again. And it's a revolving door. Right across the street from our Hope Center in downtown is the central bus terminal for Barrie. And what happens is people get released from either of those two prisons or from the CNCC, the correctional center. They're brought to downtown Barrie and they're released into the wild with nothing. With nothing. The majority of those studies have found never return. They don't leave the city. They don't return to their own homes that they had come from. They might have been arrested and sentenced to jail in Kitchener or Windsor, and they wind up at CNCC, they get released, they stay in Barrie. So that's one of the reasons that that's happening here. So it's a mission field.
It is. It sure is. Tell me a bit about uh, the interchurch relationship in Barrie. Do you see much collaboration, cooperation, mutual respect for one another? Is it are Christians good to each other in Barrie?
Ah, that's a good question. For some reason, and some church leaders, some of my colleagues and I do discuss that those very questions. And scratch our heads and wonder why there isn't more collaboration and familial love between the churches in Barrie. For some reason, it's always been a difficult go. So the Barrie ministerial, So that's the church leaders all getting together. It's gone through various iterations over the years. And then most recently, in the last 4, 5, 6 years, it became one church, Barrie. And they're actually doing a pretty good job of bringing some of the smaller churches together, the
Hmm.
larger churches. And we're a Bible Belt, right? We've got
Hmm.
some large churches here. We've got a famous church or two here that people would know the name of as well. And they don't really play well with others, it seems. They
Hmm.
do their own thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to not be critical about that when there's so much need
Hmm.
around us and when there's so many struggling smaller churches. Like we can do so much more together. We can be better together.
Hmm.
I was I mean, I'll say the comment. I'm nothing if not controversial. I warned you already. We had a couple of large churches, so we just had. Were you guys affected by the ice storm of 2025 2 weeks ago?
I live in Windsor. We don't get ice.
So we had, hundreds of thousands of people without power for over a week here, in
Wow.
Barrie and Aurelia. There's our street was basically closed with tree branches down everywhere, power lines down everywhere. So suddenly people are thrust into crisis. Like, where am I going to eat? How am I going to keep food? How am I going to cook food? How am I going to heat my home? How am I going to keep my basement from flooding? But what we know also is that crisis, when it hits, affects people already in crisis even more.
Oh yeah.
The poor get hit harder.
Hmm.
And so we saw a couple of churches in the past week and a half step up and do beautiful, wonderful things that they should do. I'm not criticizing what they did. Hey, we're delivering generators, we're delivering care packages, and we're coming to help you clear branches off your lawn and so on.
Hmm.
And I'm not criticizing what they're doing, but I've met with some of those pastors
Hmm.
about the daily crisis that people are facing here
Yeah.
every day, every month, every year. And where are you guys,
Hmm.
So what we've discovered, sorry, that does sound super critical, but it comes from a
No.
place, I think, of disappointment.
Yeah.
So what we've discovered, and I spoke about this a little bit earlier in our conversation, Kevin, was that we do see God moving at Hope. And so we've shifted from being just Hope City Church to being a missional movement, to being Hope Barrie, and really addressing that issue and inviting that to happen more and more. What we've seen happen is that it's the grassroots, it's the people sitting in pews or chairs or whatever who are coming and serving with us, and
Yeah.
not as much their leaders, which, says one thing. It says that the discipleship that's taking place at their home churches
Yeah.
is having an effect on their hearts and is
Yep.
moving them toward Christ-centered mission, whether their home church is moving that direction or involved in that or not. So that's a good thing. That's a praise God item. Then that's having an effect. So we've had a couple of small church pastors start to get involved. So last year, we decided to double down on this and we started the first ever Hope Conference.
Hmm.
And that's how we connected recently because you're having a conference
Right.
in Windsor. And
Right.
so I'm really interested in what you all are doing. And are there synergies there? And so we decided to talk to people, offer training or resourcing, or maybe just ignite some desire and passion or some interest or some new knowledge around the issues that we're talking about today, Kevin,
Hmm. Hmm.
in that Hope Conference. And
Yeah.
so that brought a lot of people together and sparked some more interest. So we're continuing to work on that. Sorry, that's a really long answer to some short questions. But no, the churches don't work really well together here, but we're trying in a couple of different ways to bring them together.
I think it's common for people like ourselves who, you know, take that, that hardcore mission to God, and I'm going to spend my life working with people that are have extreme challenges,
Yeah.
and uh, in the heart of Jesus that first prompts us to that. Um, After a while, um, we begin to think, well, why doesn't everybody think this way? Why doesn't everybody feel what I'm feeling?
Right.
Partially because they're not seeing what I'm seeing. They're living in another uh, part of the world, and you just have to drive out to the suburbs, and now you're in a sometimes there's a like the guy and the woman who drive to Toronto every day and come home, um, their house means something different to them in some ways than the guy who lives in the rooming street
Yeah,
across from Hope Center, right?
you're
There's
absolutely right.
there's the, what your attention is focused on tends to affect how you view the mission that you're on.
Yeah,
And one of the concerns that I've had over the years, and I've watched this happen, when people begin to engage in justice issues, God, the justice of God, that the Old Testament and the New Testament describe. We land in that Matthew 25, and we land in Jeremiah about being exiles, settling in and planting gardens, and we have a whole theology of the city, a whole theology of this kind of ministry that is very rooted in Scripture. Uh, but sometimes people that are in it for a while, I've watched them get jaded, where they become more politically minded. They become uh, a chip on their shoulder towards the larger church because they're not doing what I'm doing.
yeah,
And I find I have to early on in ministry, I had to really guard my heart and
yeah.
not but to say no, I'm here because God sent me here, and apparently he didn't send them here, or if he did, they didn't get the memo. So
And I'm in that place because, truthfully, because to a degree, because I see the urgency,
yeah,
that they don't see,
yeah,
and you're so right that often they're just not seeing it. And to be fair, the way that I do view it, the way that we speak about it at Hope, and the way that we try to address this issue of church unity and harmony and so on is that we recognize that just like individuals in a church, the churches themselves, the local expressions of the church, are often gifted differently, and so they do have a different mission than we do in the suburbs, or a different expression of the mission might be a better way to say
yeah,
that.
yeah,
My frustration, though, is partly because you know, Jesus comes to the poor, he comes to the margins, and it's
yeah,
intrinsic to the gospel. It's not just
yeah,
something you add on to your church program.
right,
We need to be including the poor in our mission. So what we need, of course, we obviously need support from our church friends, but what we really need is we need relational pathways, and that's what we're trying to build.
mm,
So we have a couple of churches that we do, and a couple of large churches actually that we do that well with, where we've got people who kind of liaison relationally between those churches. Because I can pick a guy up, I can clean him up, and we can probably get him saved. But then discipling him further in our context, we're often holding him in trauma, exposing him to more trauma, and he needs to get out of here. So I
mhm,
need that relational pathway to another church, maybe in the suburbs, where he can connect with a group, where he can get mentored and discipled. And so that does work for us in some cases pretty well. I'm just trying to get that message out there that
yeah,
there is a crisis here. Do you not
yeah,
see the crisis?
yeah, and we're in a shift time too, where the poor are moving to the suburbs and the rich are
Yeah.
moving into the city.
Yeah.
And so there's it's almost like someone above us is stirring the pot.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And watching him do that is so interesting. So on any given day, like when we do our grocery assistance program and we meet with people, um, we'll get like eight, nine, like represented churches represented, like eight, nine, 10 different churches. And what's
Mhm.
so interesting is we'll have people from a Baptist church, people from a charismatic church, people from the Pentecostal church, people from a Christian Reformed church. Like every
Hmm.
expression, a Presbyterian church, every expression, and whatever we are, right? And I'll point this out to people, and they'll say, "Yeah, we just love Jesus and want to serve Him and serve others." And it's
Yeah.
beautiful. And so the Lord gives me glimpses of that every
Yeah.
single week. I get to see that. It's so beautiful. He's
I,
moving. He is working.
I think it's so important that we guard our heart, in serving the Lord
I will
because
take your point. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. I need that word today.
well, I'm saying it because I have to say it to myself regularly. Hey, just, you know, bring your attention back to Jesus. Love his people. Love the people that are not in the fold. Love
Yeah.
people. And if we get to the eternal kingdom and stand before the judgment, I don't think anybody's going to get in trouble for being too merciful,
That's a great line.
but they
Yeah.
might get in trouble for being too harsh
Yeah.
and unloving.
Yeah. I don't want to come across as harsh. I'll receive the rebuke.
Oh,
But Jesus, Jesus went to the margins, but he mixed with the elite and the wealthy
yeah,
as well.
that's right. That's right.
He crosses boundaries. It's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and so we need to be people who are able to cross boundaries as well and to kind of do that seamlessly. I think Jesus comes and he creates this new humanity, this
Yeah.
new equity, this new even playing field. And I don't like the division, so I react to the division, that us and them.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. Right. That
Yeah.
othering kills us.
Yeah.
It's the way of the world to other.
Yeah.
And well, this has been great talking to you. And I do have one more question I want to ask you. And it's more a curiosity question, but who knows? It could go on for half an hour because I might be just stepping into something that you got a lot to say about. And that is, I noticed on your posts that looks like you have a sailboat.
Mm.
And tell me about tell me about boating.
Jesus slept on boats, man. I
Yeah,
just want to be like Jesus. It's the best. Do you sail
yeah.
or go boating? Do you?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
no. That's why I'm curious.
It's a passion, definitely. You know what's so great about it? You get away from people. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
I wondered if that might be part of it. It's part of your Sabbath rest, right?
Absolutely, it is. It's painful for 6 months of the year when it's not in the water. Um, it definitely is that. We have a sailboat, a small sailboat on Georgian Bay.
Hmm.
And so, it's like camping out, we can cook and sleep and do everything. And it's beautiful out there. It's just paradise. It's
Hmm.
wonderful. It's often just me and Jesus out there. My favorite thing, so I can make the connection back to marginal ministry because my favorite thing is taking a guy in recovery and putting him behind the helm of the boat. So it's got a wheel, right?
Yeah.
And if you haven't sailed, what happens is I'll put them behind the helm. And often, I've got pictures in my mind right now of these big, muscular guys, shaved head, tattooed head, behind the helm of this boat. They've never been on a boat, never had an experience like this before, and I'll take them sailing. And I'll raise the sails. So you turn the boat into the
Yeah.
wind and you raise the sails, right? They're on the helm, they're holding the wheel. And I'll start pulling the sails in. And I'll go, okay, we're going to bear off a little bit. And you just turn the bow of the boat, so that the wind catches the sails. And all of a sudden, you've got like 10,000 pounds of boat starting to heel over a little bit. And you've got this, big, street involved tattooed guy giggling like a schoolgirl because he feels the power
Yeah.
of that. And then we get to talk about how sailing is like following Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's good.
I had a friend take me out on Lake Ontario one time, and yeah, I was amazed at just the power that is involved in first of all, in a large body of water and wind, how powerful that is, but also just the power of having a few controls that can make you or break you, I guess.
Yeah, and then, when the weather picks up, your prayer life gets really good, really fast.
Were you ever scared?
There's been a few moments, sure.
Yeah.
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 There was one time a couple of years ago, and I was up near getting towards Tobamori, so on my way up to the North Channel, near Manitoulin Island, and this squall came through very, very suddenly, very fast. And I was able to text on my phone, so I was texting my wife my latitude and longitude. She's like, "Why are you sending me this?" I'm like, "Do not look at the weather
Your
radar,
your
whatever you
last
do."
your last will and testament on text. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's been a few moments like that have happened. Got to
So
trust your boat.
right, you have to trust your boat, right?
Yeah.
And worst case scenario, unless you hit some rocks, what's the likelihood that you're going to capsize and go under?
I mean, there would have to be a series of events, like a catastrophic failure that would have to happen
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that to happen.
Yeah.
It's kind of like in life, like in anything, like in aviation, like in sailing. It's like layers of Swiss cheese. And so
Hmm.
you could have a hole in one layer, but everything's still good. But when the holes start lining up and things are really going wrong quickly,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the kind of thing that would have to happen.
Yeah.
But anything can happen. Accidents do happen.
Yeah. When you come back after a good sail, are you ready to face the landlubbers again?
It's life-giving. What do you do? You play guitar. What do you
Yeah,
what else do you do?
I play guitar. Sometimes I binge on Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I live a pretty simple life with a lot of complexity in my work life.
Yeah. I can also do all of those things, binge Netflix and play guitar on a boat.
Oh, okay. I knew I was missing something.
I've taken in a board meeting from Anchor in Paradise. It was wonderful because
Oh,
we
yeah.
discovered Zoom. Pretty
Yeah,
wonderful. Yeah.
very good. Very
Yeah.
good.
It's life-giving for sure.
Good. Well, Kev, you just have inspired my afternoon. And when this episode comes out, I'll be sure to send you a link to it. And also, I'll put the Hope Barrie website in the links. And great to talk with you. And well, may the Lord shorten the days until we can do something together again.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Come sailing. Bring your guitar. Thanks for the
I would
opportunity.
love to.
It's been great. It's been a great conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye. Well, good things are happening in Barrie, Ontario, and all over Canada for that matter. On our next episode, I'm going to be talking to Richard Magnuson. Richard grew up in Kitchener, Ontario, and as a young man, he took over his father's furniture business, grew it to a multi-million dollar business. And Richard just finished writing a book in the past year, Going Big. And it's not just a book about business, although there's some of that in the book, but it's about going big with faith, going big with God, and going big with life. He's got some incredible stories to tell, just as he's been a man that faithfully journeyed with God through a lifetime. Now he's in his retirement years, and just a lot of wisdom. And also a good insight into Kitchener-Waterloo area. And a very unusual city, incomparable in many ways to other cities. So if you want to learn more about Kitchener, come on back on our next episode. Till that time, I'm your host, Kevin Rogers, and you are listening to Sidewalk Skyline Podcast.